Well, hello, friends. I'd like to tell you about a new webinar at Astrology University called Venus in Myth and Psyche. If that sounds a little bit familiar, that's because Jason Holley, our presenter, did a whole series on the signs in Myth and Psyche, and now he's going to tackle the planets. Hey, Jason, thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Tony. Good to be with you.
Absolutely. So good to have you. So when you first wrote me about this and you were thinking about doing something on Venus, and then a couple of emails later, you said, I think I want to do all the planets. I was like, go, Jason. So can you tell folks a little bit about what this series is about for you and what you're hoping to share?
Yeah, absolutely. The main intention of the webinar is to really invoke the experience of Venus and to help people really get the archetypal field of Venus. And so the way that we will approach that is through myth and story of Aphrodite in the Greek tradition, of Venus in the Roman tradition, of Inanna in the Mesopotamian tradition. These are all streams of myth that really inform astrology. And we'll kind of seek to embed ourselves in that understanding. So it'll be what I would call embodied storytelling. So I'll be sharing the stories. I'll be inviting people to kind of feel into what it might be like to be inside those stories, like in terms of sensation, emotion, dreams, imagery, and so on. We'll have a lot of imagery of Venus from across time. And in the process, what I hope for is for people to really get the deep felt sense of that. And then we'll look at it also in the context of the skies that some people have been born under and the situations of Venus that happen in the natal chart or by progression and transit, and kind of see how do the myths and stories play through. And how can we really live in a more Venusian way? And what I mean by that is just be in conscious participation. How do we let the symbol speak as astrologers and just as people who are interested in connecting with the full range of the human experience? How do we let that symbol speak? So we'll be kind of invoking a whole field of resonances and imagery and story.
Beautiful. Well, this webinar is unique in that there's two parts. A lot of our webinars are just one part, but this one is a two-part series. And in the first part, it mentioned in the description that you're going to explore loves and lovers, and in the second part, passions and possessions. Can you tell folks a little bit about what you're hoping to talk about in those two parts?
Yeah, and I mean, for some of us, loves and lovers are no different than passions and possessions. It's
Touche,
probably,
yes.
probably a good idea to explain the differentiation. But the first one, I wanted to start with the loves and lovers. Aphrodite was often referred to just as love, like capital L love. That was her name. That was who she was. And so we will start with the relational field, in part because maybe one of the wisdom of Venus is that we know ourselves through our relation with others, through our attractions and repulsions, through the touch of another person, you feel yourself. And Aphrodite along with Ares, or Venus along with Mars, are the parents of Eros in some of the stories. So really it's this. And so in the first webinar, we'll be looking at some of the lovers of Aphrodite. And of course, there were many, but we'll be looking at, for instance, her relationship with Adonis, with Anchises, the father of Aeneas. We'll be looking at Inanna's relationship with Dumuzi, and several others. And of course, the famous romance of Mars and Venus. And that will give us a lot of perspective on all the different relational constellations that can form with Venus, right? We're going to be looking at myth as almost like action templates for the planet in the chart. And so to me, every planet carries a set of stories and connects into a field of stories and resonances, which they then draw other planets into playing out with them. And of course, from that other planet's perspective, it'll be in its own myth with Venus. So, when you see a relation between your Venus and another planet, how might it be the story of Venus's relation with Adonis or Anchises and so on? So we'll be kind of looking to, understand that field of meanings. And then the second webinar, the one on passions and possessions, we'll really be looking at some of the objects, sacred objects that were connected to Venus, such as the mirror, that the glyph actually looks like a handheld mirror, right? And the girdle of Aphrodite, which was this magical garment with a lot of, these will take us to almost like a deeper Venus in some respects, because they show us how Venus, Aphrodite, she's one of the oldest among the Olympian gods. She's the oldest, right? She's born before Zeus and Hera and the others, because we'll talk about this, but she's born of Saturn and Uranus. Part of why I kind of wanted to do this one now is because we're still in that Saturn-Uranus square, and the conflict of Saturn and Uranus gave birth to Aphrodite. So maybe that's what we're trying to do. But the story is always alive wherever in time we're located. So the second one will be really looking at that. And you might say it's a little more of the interiority of Venus. I mean, one way to think about this is the Libra dimension of Venus, the more relational perhaps, and the Taurian Venus that is a bit more sensual. Sometimes Aphrodite Urania was named, and Aphrodite Pandemos. We'll get into that too. So you might say that, but I wouldn't want to get too stuck on, oh, this is the Libra webinar, and it's not like that.
Right. Okay, great. Beautiful. And then in terms of how long somebody's been studying astrology, if a beginner shows up, do you think they might feel lost, or what's the kind of appropriate level of study that you're looking for in the attendees?
I deeply feel that this is for all. And what I mean by that is, and for instance, I partly was inspired by doing a couple of workshops, like longer workshops in a more participatory fashion on this topic. And so people who attended, some only were just interested in myth. They didn't have an astrology background. They absolutely could get into the stories and experience it. And it's a great way into astrology. After all, myth was the gateway to astrology historically. That's where astrology rises out of. And so it's the mother who astrology later divorced and, married philosophy. married philosophy. Right? And some of us are now like, hey, you want to, remember your mother.
Right.
But so for those people, but then also I want to say that for the experienced students of astrology, this is about dimensionalizing our understanding of Venus. It's about dropping below the calculus of formulas that we all know and work with and that are useful to us. It's about reconnecting to the music of astrology and again, dimensionalizing the archetypes. So my experience is that very experienced astrologers who attend my work come out with a restoried, right, experience of the archetype and new stories that they can tell. It's almost always refreshing when we visit the realm of myth, and it's a reservoir that goes so deep. And I know you know that, and many of the teachers of Astrology University have shown us that. Demetra and others, like we go deep, and there's so much that we all get refreshed. We need that refreshing, right? Like our techniques dry out without story. So I'm hoping it will be both old story and fresh at the same time. I know it will be.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, thanks for that, Jason, and thanks for putting it together for us. If you are interested in this webinar, head over to astrologyuniversity.com/events to sign up live. If you happen to be watching this video before we present it live, you'll find it there on the event calendar. And if you're tuning into this video after it's already been presented live, you can still download the webinar in your own time, and just head over to astrologyuniversity.com, and in the search field of any page of the website, you can either type in Jason's name, Jason Holley, or type in Venus in Myth and Psyche, and it will pop right up. So thanks again for putting this together for us, Jason. Can't wait to see it. And thanks for joining us. And until next time, take good care.